All right, welcome back into the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. We almost never, ever do interviews. They are saved for the most prestigious of company. And today's guest, come on now, we had to do this. We had to do this. I'm Matt Norlander, and we're going to welcome in Jay Wright, a college. I got to get used to this. A college basketball analyst for CBS Sports, who you'll see throughout the regular season on CBS and CBS Sports Network. And in March, he'll be doing studio work throughout the NCAA tournament for CBS Sports and Warner Brothers Discovery Sports, which used to be Turner Sports, but it's now Warner Brothers Discovery Sports. Jay, welcome into the pod, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Great introduction. And I'm going through my introduction to this new world. It's great to be on. I feel it's like safer even without GP here.
Yeah.
Just me and you. This is nice. I listen to you guys. So it's an honor to be on the show. I know you don't really have guests a lot, so it really is an honor.
Listen, it is an honor to have you on. That's correct. Listen, we needed to get this done. Parrish is yet again in transit. You are okay. Couple things. One, you are definitely safer with just me here. Okay,
I know that, man.
Okay. Two, little peek behind the curtain for the listeners. You know, I give Jay a call. I can't wait to have you on. And I come to discover you're a pod listener.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he's like, and he's like, listen, man, just don't hit me with the trivia time. I won't. But the fact that you were aware of this knocked my socks off. No trivia time, at least not on the first one, Jay. No trivia time.
You two go back at each other with that. And when you're doing it, I'm thinking, oh man, I don't know that one. Man. Like this, I hope as I start doing this color analyst,
yes.
I don't get put on the spot like this every 10 minutes like you do it to each other.
I know. Well, it's wonderful. And listen, I think the hope and plan here is when we get into the tournament, we'll bring you back on a little special episode. We'll have GP involved, but this is the easy first run of it to really, toughen up the skin before we get to March when I can't listen. I make no promises the next time when my man is on with me.
I got you, man. Spring training for the rookie, man. I appreciate it.
That's right. Before we're going to obviously preview the CBS Sports Classic, big time stuff coming up this weekend on CBS, and actually a triple header that we'll get to. But can we just quickly rewind to your first on-air call, in earnest, was the Penn Villanova game. How did you go about preparing for that? And I adored the interview with you and Kyle before the game started, because the grin he had on his face, and you couldn't even contain your laughter. Take me into what that experience was like for you, my man.
It was wild. And when you're on the other side of it, when you're a coach, and they ask you, whatever network is doing the TV, if they ask you come in early at 5:00 for a 7:00 game, that's the last thing you want to hear, because usually you get in there at 6:00 before a 7:00 game. I do, because there's nothing for the head coach really to do before the game except get mad at somebody for something, warm-ups, a manager, security. Nothing good ever happens. So I would always try to spend the least amount of time before the game as possible, so I wouldn't get on anybody's nerves. So now I have to ask Kyle, come in 2 hours early. And that's where it started. And he was great, obviously. But then when I came out to do it, he looked at me in the sport coat, which I don't really use sport coats that much. I usually have a suit. And if I'm in a sport coat, something really casual. Yeah. So he started laughing at me in the sport coat. So I'm like, we're not going to be able to do this legit until I get this part out of the way. So I had to mention that he was laughing at me. But it was really cool, because it gave me publicly a little bit of a chance to kind of put it out there that, all right, this is you, brother. Like, you're running this now. I'm proud of you. I am so out of this, and I'm starting something new, and I'm the rookie now, and you've got this. And I'm really proud of him. I'm proud of what he's doing. As you know, they had a tough stretch in the beginning. No excuses. A lot of teams go through that, but where they are right now, I think they're playing great basketball.
Yeah, they're definitely, listen, they've won 3 in a row. Oklahoma, Penn, Boston College look good in that. Nova's really, really coming along there. On that note with Kyle, though, I was wondering if you could bring us in just a little bit more here, because it's an interesting spot for you. And I've talked a little bit with John Shire about this with Krzyzewski. You want to obviously be as available to him as possible. He probably seeks your counsel and guidance, but there probably is a balance you want to strike. And you also, now you are an analyst there. So how has it gone about for you? How has that been so far when, it's barely been a minute here since you were coaching the program, and I mean, Kyle, long time assistant, knows the program so well, as all the guys do on that staff. Have you tried to be there for him as much as you can, but also have a little bit of separation the way that Krzyzewski has to an extent with Shire down there at Duke?
Exactly. There's a balance that Kyle and I are working on together. And the timing of this, starting with CBS here in December, actually, rather than early in November, has been really helpful too, because we've kind of weaned ourselves off of each other to this point. Both sides, like him. We had times where I would say to him, like, I don't want to be around too much. And he'd say, Jay, anytime you're around, it's helpful. So I want you around. So we were always communicating about that. But I feel like the Oklahoma game, I did like 8 minutes with Raf and Tom McCarthy in the second half. It wasn't calling the game. It was just kind of getting my feet wet. It was really cool to be there in that position, be able to go watch Oklahoma in a shoot around. Porter Moser was my first guy that I had to reach out to say, look, if you don't want to talk to me before the game, I get it. And he was like, no, let's go. We talked for like an hour.
Love it.
Very little about the Oklahoma Villanova game, by the way, just basketball. But I did my 8 minutes in the second half, and then I was able to go watch the game as a Villanova fan. And it was a real gradual introduction to being an analyst and really separation from being there with Kyle. So he knows I'm always there for him, but he's got this now. And as you mentioned, Matt, you know that staff at Villanova. Those guys have all been there a long time. When I was watching practice in the preseason, I really felt like I'm not worried at all about this development, because it just looks like they're running practice as if I was there. So the staff has been there for so long. Their struggles early were really just injuries and getting the right rotation down. Bringing Cam Whitmore back actually puts everybody in the right spot now. Plus, he's a talent, but it puts everybody in their right spot. So they're doing a great job. And I feel like Kyle and I have really got to a good point. I'm the analyst. I don't think I'll do any more Villanova games. I don't know. But it'll be more comfortable doing other. My next game is Louisville, Kentucky. That'll be really cool, because being able to be at that game, I've always watched it on TV, should be really cool.
And by the way, the one thing you did seemingly bequeath to Kyle Neptune was you accomplished everything you could possibly ask for in your career and at Villanova. But the one exception is you did not have a one and done lottery pick on the roster when you were there. And Cam Whitmore is certainly, he's back, he's healthy, man. Oh man, what a talent! And he's going to change their ceiling. So that's big time stuff. I wanted to ask you this. So I am, and by no means am I putting you and me on the same plane, but when I was in college trying to make a little extra money, I would officiate freshman level and JV level high school basketball games. Okay. The only reason why I bring this up is this. I remember, and I did that for like 5-6 years. When I would officiate a game, the way I would actually interpret the stuff on the floor, it was different than if I watched the game in person as a writer or on television. I'm wondering for you, and this may not be the case, but now that you are in the analyst role and you're not so locked in on Villanova and you're locked in on the scouting report and you can only talk about the opponents that you've either faced or guys in the Big East, is the way that you're actually watching a game, are you using different eyes, if you will, than what you did for, 30, 40 years? Or is that transition maybe not quite happened yet?
No, that's a good analogy, Matt. It really is. It's totally different when when I would watch games when I was coaching, I would look for actions, offensive actions, defensive adjustments teams were making that if we were going to play against that team later, I would make note of that so that we're prepared for that. If we weren't going to play that team, I was stealing it for something maybe we could use. Whereas now I'm watching the games, and then I'm listening to the color commentator more often just to learn. I'm looking more at the personnel and the players because there's part of it that, fans are listening to the game, because I've learned after just doing 2 games that knowing the personnel and knowing the players and the coaches personally is the best way to prepare, because once you get to the game and you're sitting there on the sideline, which is a great seat, by the way, looking across at the coaches, I never did that before. You see the actions, you see the strategy, you see that in live time, and that's natural to us as coaches. So getting to know the players personally and the coaches is more important preparing for a game now.
That's insightful, and yeah, I would imagine that will only expand as we move along. Before I get to the season, or get to the games for this weekend, I did want to get some initial impressions from you. We're 6 weeks into the season now. We've had some intriguing surprises. I mean, UConn's been way better than people. UConn expect to be good, but not at this level, right? Purdue undefeated at this point. You had some preseason top 10 teams that have had some struggles and have taken some lumps. Creighton being among that group. You've had Shire at Duke, who's done a pretty good job overall to this point as well. Gonzaga's, and we'll get to them a little bit later on. They've been good, but maybe not at the highest level there. Broadly, what things kind of stand out to you most so far as you look at this through an analyst's eyes for CBS Sports with the season to this point? What's at front of your mind right now, Jay?
This is so much fun talking about this. I remember you and I were in the bubble early in the season a couple years ago up in Connecticut, and we had just lost to Purdue, and you and I are talking after the game, and you're going through all these teams and where we fit with others. And I'm thinking to myself, I have no idea what he's talking about. I'm going to take everything Matt says as gospel about these other teams because I haven't seen any of them yet. And I don't know. I'm so concerned about us. We just blew a 10-point lead against Purdue. But now being in that position where I can actually watch all these games, it's so much fun. And not think about, as I said to you, like, we got to guard that action. We're going to have to play that team. It's awesome. And one of the things I would say to you that is interesting to me is that I think the parity of the top teams, and I'm saying the top 25 teams, just parity. There are about 25, 30 that are kind of on another level, but the parity of those top 30 is the best it's ever been. And then if you look at like the top 100, 150, there's parity there also, more so than ever. And I think it's because, like you look at Gonzaga going down to Texas, and nobody was winning in that. There's not a team in college basketball that's going to win that night in that environment. And then Texas gets Illinois, and Illinois beats them. Illinois comes home. I watched the Penn State game. Penn State went in there with a bunch of upperclassmen, a fifth-year senior, Funk from Bucknell. He's drilling threes. It is as good as it's ever been. And why? It's NIL. Is keeping the older guys in college, which I think eventually is going to help the NBA. You and I could talk about that another time, which is a passion of mine.
Yep. And
it's the transfer portal where a lot of teams are remaining old. And I think that's keeping all of the top 100, maybe 150 teams really good. Who it's affecting is the low major, mid-major, and it's affecting high school recruits. Because if you're not like one of these guys at Alabama, these stud freshmen at Alabama, if you're not one of those guys, you're kind of getting recruited at a lower level now because everyone's getting the experienced mid-major guys to move up. Like Mark Sears at Alabama played at Ohio. He looks like a big time Power 5 player, so I think that's going to continue. I think it's going to be great for college basketball as soon as we can kind of figure out this combination of NIL, transfer portal. We got to figure this out in the next few years.
Yeah, we'll sit down, get together, and solve the world's problems and get that done as well. A quick personal note: yes, Bubbleville 2 years ago. We'll never forget. We're sitting there talking. You had beaten Arizona State, I'm pretty sure, and you were literally sitting there talking with a few of us.
Tennessee, wasn't it Tennessee?
I thought it was. I thought.
I trust you. I
thought you had beaten Arizona State because remember you scheduled. You were like. It was something like I think I gotta play another game here, and then you wound up playing Virginia Tech, and then you lost to them in overtime, and you were but literally it was a hash it out session with I want to say
and it was like 12:30 in the morning.
It would that was what was so hilarious is like the conversation you had with me and a couple other media members. I think the great SID Mike Sheridan was there as well. It seemed like it was something that would be reserved for maybe you and your staff, and I know eventually you did, but. Man, what a different time that was! What a different time that was. But a wonderful.
We did that a couple nights, Matt, and then we even added Hartford, if you remember, at the end.
Yes,
and we just kept staying in the bubble. It eventually helped us, but mentally that was really fatiguing.
It was no doubt about it. All right, we're gonna talk CBS Sports Classic and the triple header coming up here this weekend on CBS. But first, a word from our partners.
Don't stop watching Leo Messi, the man, the myth, the legend, Messi! The GOAT. Utterly explosive. The UEFA Champions League. Stream PSG matches live February on Paramount+.
All right, so it's a huge weekend upcoming across men's college hoops. CBS has the best of it here. 1 o'clock Eastern, Gonzaga versus Alabama in Birmingham. And then you've got the CBS Sports Classic. Ohio State will play North Carolina, and UCLA will play Kentucky. Let's start, Jay, with the CBS Sports Classic here. Off the top, actually, so you've got Holtman, who you're familiar with from your Big East days. But did you go up against Holtman at Ohio State, Hubert at Carolina? You've got Mick at UCLA, Cal at Kentucky. Did you actually ever coach against any of those four coaches at their current schools?
Yes, all of them. Even Chris both at Ohio State and at Butler. And struggled with them. We really did. I have great respect for him. Hubert, I don't think we played Hubert when he was assistant at Carolina,
right?
But not as the head coach. But John, great John stories, like everyone has. John Calipari, early in our career. No, actually, he was at Memphis then, early in our career.
That's what prompted this, Jay, because I looked it up and I was like, I don't think Jay coached him when he was at Nova and Cal was at Kentucky. I don't think you guys ever faced off. No,
we did not. And we talk enough during the year. I'm glad we didn't. We recruit against each other, and I always just tell him, like, yeah, if the guy's really good and he's one and done, just take him. Just save me the time. He's the best. And Mick at UCLA and at Cincinnati.
Because you had the road game. I was teeing it up for the listeners as well. You had the road game against UCLA, 2 years ago, right?
Yes.
Part of the West Coast swing there. So you are familiar with these coaches, obviously. Let's get into Ohio State and the game against Carolina. The Buckeyes, they're a good squad. I would say they're a little bit of an unknown from a national perspective at this point, just because of the roster. They've got some good pieces there. I don't know how much you've delved into the tape overall, but let's start with Holtman's Buckeyes. Anything about them that stands out, and would you think that they're in a better position right now against Carolina going into this game? Because quite clearly, if we had to pick this game on November 5th, Jay, Carolina would have been an overwhelming favorite. Everyone would have taken UNC against Ohio State. Right now, though, the plot is twisted a little bit, and it might not be such an automatic.
I agree. As a matter of fact, I think going into it, Ohio State is just playing better right now. that the game against Rutgers is really tough. They're a tough out. Their game against Rutgers, Zeb Key was a beast. So I look forward to him going up against Baycott. And I love their point guard. And I know Bruce Thornton at Ohio State, and I know Chris Holtmann loves him. I am amazed, in recruit. I still look at the recruiting thing. Like, how does that kid not go somewhere in the South from Georgia, goes to Ohio State? But he is perfect for the Big Ten and perfect for that program. Like he could be a long-time legendary point guard there. And if just the improvement he had from Maui till now, I love him. And because of him and Zeb Key, and they've got shooters around them, and they're coming off a tough home win against Rutgers, and they have a week to prepare, I think they're going to be feeling really good going into this game against Carolina. Now, Carolina is feeling good coming off the Georgia Tech game, and RJ Davis got it going. And Baycott looks better to me. He didn't look right in some of those other games. The 4 overtime game, I know he's struggling with ankle, shoulder. He looked better against Georgia Tech, but they don't look like they're clicking yet. And I think you and I were talking about this. This is a long time ago, but in 87, 88, we went to the Final 8, and we lost one player, Mark Plansky, who's very similar to Grady Manick. And the next year we came back, we were preseason 2 in the country, and we went to the NIT because no one realized the impact that Mark Plansky, we had superstars, Doug West played in the NBA, Kenny Wilson, Gary Massey, but no one realized the impact that Mark Plansky had. And I look at Grady Manick the same way. He was an outstanding college player and big-time winner.
It's true. He was a major piece on that. No Manick. They brought in Pete Nance, who he's been good. And actually, when I saw him in Portland, Carolina, he was playing some at the 5, almost out of necessity. Baycott also got a little bit of an injury there down the stretch. He's a similar player, but not an identical player. I'm interested in if Carolina can slow down Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State's a top 5 team in points per possession right now. And Holtmann has always been a good offensive coach, which is what I wanted to ask you about as someone who's gone up against him. Traditionally, at Ohio State, at Butler, his teams have been traditionally more offensive oriented and better on that side of the floor than defense. Like, he's had some good defensive teams as well, don't get me wrong, but traditionally they've been better on offense. To prepare against a Holtmann coach team, like when Hubert and that staff are running that scout, and we don't need to get absolutely buried in the X and O's and J's, but what, from your memory and going up against Holt, what are like the 1 or 2 things that you think Carolina is going to have to account for if it wants to get out of trouble there? Because Carolina does not rate as a top 50 defensive team right now.
You described Chris Holtmann well, but it's interesting that you describe him as being more of an offensive coach, because when we prepared for Butler, and we just played Ohio State last year in the NCAA tournament, you're going to have to run against good, like North Carolina's going to have to know they're going to have to really communicate against their screening actions and be ready to defend their post play as a team, because what they do is they read how you play them extremely well. So you can't just say we're going to play them one way, because they're going to read and adjust. So you have to do that. But we always concerned with them scoring against them, because they're so solid. They kind of sucker you into shooting perimeter jump shots, which Carolina's not great at. They sucker you into it. They protect the lane. They're real physical, and then they can test you real hard. So it's a mind game they play with you defensively, and Carolina's going to have to know that. Like Leaky Black, they're going to mess with him and back off him, and they're going to help with his man on drivers, Davis driving, and Baycott in the post.
Okay, I want to ask you about Carolina's and its situation right now. You were never in an identical situation, but Jay, I feel like there have been a couple of times that you were coaching Nova going into the season, pretty high expectations, and it just didn't start right, whether it's the first 2 weeks, the first month or so. How do you think Hubert's handling this? And what is I don't know if there's a secret, but from your experience, like I remember right when I was starting to really cover the sport nationally, end of the 2000s, early 2010s, like there were a couple of times. In fact, if I can be honest enough, like I remember one of the first times we ever talked, I kind of walked away a bit flattered that you were as forthcoming on the record as you were about how you were needing to rebuild what Villanova was going to be and the culture it would become. And now I look back a decade later, I'm like, man, the guy absolutely nailed it. I don't think UNC has a culture issue or anything like that, but how do you get teams out of this rut, right? Is it ultimately, is it on the staff, or does it more land on the players holding each other accountable? Because UNC, while it's getting back on the right track, we just can't deny it. Preseason #1 team, first team to ever fall out of the polls this early, and whatever they had going last year, manic or no manic, it has not clicked for one reason or another. What do you think is the way to get them out of this, and what do you think Hubert and that staff are really working on to make sure that happens?
Hubert is great at communicating with his players, and it's a different type of communication now in this era. And we don't have time to go into all that, but he's very current in dealing with these guys, and this is something that they have to go through together. That the coaches can't blame the players can't blame the coaches, and that happens. But you need to go through that together and unite and say, we both have to take responsibility here, and we both have to fix it together. And when you do that, that's when you really become strong at the end of the season. I think they're finding a way to fit, the replacement of Manic in there. I think Pete Nance, you said it, he is not Manic. So Leaky Black's got to do a little. I'd like to see him get on the offensive glass more. I'd like to see him get to the foul line more. I'd like to see him be even more aggressive defensively, more disruptive. They've got to figure that all out together. Whereas Hubert's got to talk to Leaky about that. Leaky's got to listen to Hubert about that. And that's the way you do it. The one thing is, if they can get to the tournament, which I think they will, the experience of having been in the tournament together is so valuable that it doesn't matter how they go in, like 6 seed, 8 seed, doesn't matter. If they get there, their experience from last year is going to be very, very valuable.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating team. I look forward to seeing how they navigate through the rest of the season, because I think that, and especially once they get to the tournament, just no one, I think, will underestimate them, no matter if they're in, what the number is next to that name. A reminder, Jay will be on coverage studio all weekend on Saturday for CBS Sports triple header. Let's talk UCLA and Kentucky real quick. That's the nightcap. I will be on hand at MSG for both of these games. Both of these teams rank top 10 in KenPom. They were preseason top 10 in the polls, have slipped just a little bit there, but Cal's got a 7-2 Kentucky team that defensively has been pretty stout to this point. Cason Wallace might be the best defensive freshman in the country. He's been outstanding. Offensively, they're still getting there. They have the reigning National Player of the Year. UCLA 8-2, and Mix had a team that's been able to score quite a bit in recent seasons. This group has done so as well. UCLA's only losses, Jay, as you well know, they're both very respectable. Neutral court. They went out to Vegas. They got beat by Illinois and got beat by Baylor. There's no shame in that. We'll see what they can do moving forward, going up against Kentucky. Just a listener note here. We are taping this shortly before UCLA plays at Maryland. So there is a chance, if you're listening to this or watching this live, they'll have taken a third L. But at this point, just 2 losses. And Kentucky's losses, Michigan State on a neutral at Gonzaga. So both these teams, there's nothing to be ashamed about on the resume. What are you expecting from this game, Jay?
I think both of these teams are in very similar situations, and they're similar teams. Really strong defensively. Both of them high-level assists, really share the ball, and low turnovers, which is really kind of unique for one of Cal's teams early in the season, because usually he's fitting so many guys together. They're playing hard, but he's trying to figure it out. It's really, really interesting. This is going to be a great game because they are very similar teams. Both of them, if they get stops, can get out and score, but they're not afraid to grind it out, either one of them in the half court. And what's interesting and intriguing with what Cal's doing with this team, and I think he's a master at building teams because he's always got so many different pieces he's putting together. But Shibwe is developing, and I think his development for the next level is going to be based on his ability to be a go-to player down the stretch, where he can make good decisions, have like a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, make the right pass if he gets fouled, get fouled, make free throws, which he's shooting a good clip. He's got shooters around him. They're shooting 39% from three. He's got 4 guys in double figures. So they're really starting to come together as a team. And, you know, they haven't played a team like UCLA, but this is the perfect time for them to play UCLA. And I think they're ready. And I think UCLA is in the same spot. Like if you look at Tiger Campbell, Jalen Clark, Jaime Jaquez, those are 3 of the toughest, most experienced guys in college basketball. A great team to build around. Tiger's got to shoot a little bit better from 3, which I think he will. Same with Jaime. They shoot a little bit better from 3. And they're fitting the other guys in around them. Going on the road, I think they were at Stanford, at Oregon, and getting 2 wins handily is showing that they're really ready to go. So this is the perfect time for them to play Kentucky. So I can see these guys grinding it out in an extremely well-played game because they don't turn the ball over. They both pass it well, and they both defend.
You know, I get Villanova guard vibes off of Tiger Campbell. He seems like a guy that you would have loved. Come on now, right? Everything about him, he seems like the exact kind of guy you would have loved to have in your system.
You know what, Matt? Last year we played them out at UCLA to start the season in an overtime game and at Pauley Pavilion, which was what an incredible experience. Great place to play. I was like sometimes pinching myself. Like we got there 2 hours before the game. It was packed and people were telling me this never happens at Pauley Pavilion. People here this early before a game.
Yeah.
But it was a late start, like 8:30 or something. It reminded me of one of those games when I was a kid when Notre Dame used to play out there and you'd watch it on TV at 11:30 at night. But it was awesome. But the guy that got us in the end was Tiger Campbell making toughness plays down the stretch and in overtime. I have so much respect for him, and I'd love to have him on one of our teams.
I want to ask you real quick about, Sheboy's Sheboy, transferred and Kentucky's got some more experience there. The idea of the red shirt is disappearing quickly. Your 28 title team, how many red shirts were on that team? How many guys did you redshirt off that 2018 title team freshman season? Like 5 of them?
Dante DiVincenzo,
Bridges,
Mikal Bridges, Eric Paschal. Somebody else with Jermaine Samuels, I believe, was sitting out that year.
Yeah. I don't know if Gillespie did. It was either
at least 4.
Like, and I think it was Gillespie. You wanted to redshirt him, and at that point, you told me you were like, "We can't.
Yes,
we can't redshirt him." But my question is this: like, that's not getting ever repeated again, right? It's just not going to happen, right? There's never going to be a team like your 2018 title team that can win it all and do it the way that you did it. Now, maybe you win it if they don't redshirt, but it feels like that actual process was almost the last of its kind. Would you agree?
Actually, Phil Booth redshirted also. You're right. There was 5. There might be some based on injury. And that actually is helpful, if it's not a major injury.
Yeah.
But, I sometimes wish guys would understand, unless you're just a freak athlete that is so elite that the NBA is going to invest in you, you're so much better going into the NBA prepared, physically and mentally mature, because you only have a short window in the NBA to make it. And you want to be at your best when you're in that short window. So there's a few guys that it doesn't matter because they're going to invest in you and keep you because of your freakish elite athleticism. But if you're not that guy, go in there experienced. And all of our guys have benefited from that. But I do think guys are going to do that now because of NIL. And I think they're going to be more prepared. And I think it's going to actually improve the NBA. That's another discussion for you and me on another day.
No, I agree. It's interesting. But I wanted to ask you about that because the the team that winds up winning the title this year. It just won't be of the same. It won't be of the same formula. But yes, I could see how possibly something similar might emerge again. But yeah, that 2018 title team was just one of the more dominant ones in recent history. Let's talk Bama Gonzaga. CBS 1:00 tip Eastern on Saturday. Alabama's coming off that just tremendous road win over Houston, number 1 ranked Houston. Help inform a fool like me. Does Nate Oates, does he deploy a style that's similar to what you ran at Villanova in your later years from what you can tell? Because you had told me this, and I remember talking to some of your assistants, in fact, Kyle, a few years back. I was unaware of it until, you guys told me, where it's like, we run stuff, but we give, a lot is on the players out there to run this one or this one, this play. It's, you don't have a playbook that's, 3 inches thick, so to speak. I don't know if Oates does or not, but when you watch them play, is it kind of like what you were doing in your final 5-6 years running the Wildcats there, Jay?
Very similar. And this team, he's doing it with bigger, longer players, which automatically makes you better defensively. How are they playing these 4 freshmen and getting away with their inexperience and still being a great defensive team? It's their length and athleticism can make up for a lot of mistakes defensively. You're playing a smaller, undersized, no matter how talented he is, freshman that doesn't really understand what's going on defensively. He can't cover for his mistakes. These guys do. Matt, I was blown away. I'm watching that game. They're down 15 at Houston. Place is raucous. I'm looking at it. This says, okay, they can't get the stops against Houston. Houston's too tough to get out and run in transition. All of a sudden, they've got 4 freshmen on the court. They've got Clowney at the 5 spot, and they're starting to make the run with the freshmen because defensively they were so long. They were getting stops and they were getting out in semi-transition. And it was really interesting to me that in their 4 overtime game against North Carolina, down the stretch, it looked to me like the only guy that could make plays was Javon Quinterly. He had 21 points. They had the ball in his hands every time at the end of every overtime. He was the player of the game. In this game, he wasn't even in the game at the end of the game.
Nope.
Brandon Miller goes to the free throw line. He makes 6 free throws down the stretch as a freshman. Jaden Bradley's playing the point. And I'm saying this is how far they've come from that Carolina game. That was as impressive a win, and there's been some great ones, as I've seen in college basketball so far this year.
It was so awesome. And I got to imagine when you watch this game on Saturday, both Oates and Few, just the way they coach their teams. I don't know. There's Jay Wright vibes in how they run their programs and the style.
Take that as a compliment, my man. I love both of them.
Right. So, and Gonzaga is yet again an elite offensive team, actually rates better right now in offensive efficiency. But I mean, I got to put you on the analyst. I got to put you in the analyst chair right now. Like, objectively, I don't know how many Gonzaga games you've watched so far. The losses are all respectable. At Texas, Purdue on the neutral. Purdue ran them out of the building. I was there, watched that in Portland, and then lost a nail biter that they easily could have won against Baylor on a neutral in South Dakota. So the losses are all good, but they're 7-3. Is it? I don't know. Is it fair to say that Gonzaga right now, at least, looks to be maybe a notch below from the teams we've seen from the past couple of seasons? There is no Chet Holmgren like a season ago, and they don't have a Jalen Suggs like 2 seasons ago when they obviously made that undefeated run to the title game before getting knocked off by Baylor.
I think it's fair, and I think Mark would probably say the same thing, but I don't think that we have to worry that they might not be in the same spot at the end of the year. It's going to be a different journey. And what we were talking about earlier, Matt, about how everybody can get older now, that used to make Gonzaga really elite, is that they would be old at every position and then maybe mix in a Scruggs one and done guy, but he was the best in the country, or a Chet Holmgren. They'd mix, but everybody else around him was really old and super talented. They've got Hickman, who's a sophomore at the point, and he's not he's not one of those. They've always had a dominant point guard. He's more of a combo guard that's a shooter, and he's learning the point. So they've never had a situation where their point guard is learning their role. They've had always a point guard who's a stud, one of the best in the country, and guys around them. And the other thing is, I think I'd like to see, like, Timmy is an incredible college player, but he's got to really improve his free throw shooting, and he should be and can be an elite passer. He's got a poor assist to turnover ratio, and he can improve so much in that area. And I know he's a coachable guy. So there's a lot of improvement possible for this team. And Mark is the best. They're just going to have a different journey to get there. But in the end, they could be just as good as any of these Zags teams.
Great point on his passing. Timmy is an undeniably good passer. The turnovers, excellent stuff, Jay, because you're right. And then from the foul line right now, Timmy has taken 65 foul shots as of this recording, 57% from the field. And you could make the argument that some of the ones he missed in the Baylor game certainly led to the Bears beating the Zags there. So again, triple header.
Last year,
yeah,
the game they played Alabama last year, it was amazing because they played in Seattle and they looked like a little disinterested, and Alabama came out and drilled threes. It was incredible. Who was that? The shooter they had last year? He went off on them.
For Bama?
Yeah.
Shackelford had an incredible game. Yeah.
They had 13 threes, but again, Gonzaga shot 13 from 25 from the foul line in that game. A lot of it was Timmy, and they're going to go into this game against Alabama. For whatever reason, they looked a little disinterested last year. I can't figure it out, but that's not happening Saturday. They are going to come in fired up, hungry. This is going to be a really good game. Also, we got 3 great games Saturday.
Listen, it's kismet that the huge Saturday, and big studio debut for you. Can't wait. And yes, Bama's obviously in the stretch of just an incredible week. Houston, Memphis was on Tuesday, and then Gonzaga here, and trying to it swept the series with Houston, won a year ago, won this year. Going to try and do the same thing with Gonzaga. Can we listen? Game talk's great, but I want to wrap on this. Matt, like, I would, when I was
coaching, when you would get to this point, I would get scared. Right now it's fun. I can say anything now.
Exactly. Okay. I wanted to get into like your retirement and all that. We're gonna save that for the next pod. All right. We'll talk about retired and deciding to get into the media. Like, that'll be our next conversation. But let's wrap with some fun stuff, because my man, I seemingly could not go like more than 2 weeks between April and October without on my Twitter, feed or on television. Oh, look, it's Jay Wright at another game. He's just permanently at Phillies, Eagles, Flyers, and 76ers games. Oh, now, first of all, you're living your best life. I love it. My question is, can you give me a ballpark? How many games between the 4 professional major sports franchises in the city of brotherly love? How many do you think you've gone to since you retired, my man?
No, I not that much. Is a lot of Phillies. The Phillies, from growing up in Philly, I love all the teams. I'd love to go to all the games, and it is one of the things I look forward to in retirement. I love a Flyers game is awesome here in Philly. Eagles is off the charts. Sixers is awesome. I don't go to as many of the Sixers, believe it or not, just because it's all basketball people, and I don't get to watch. I like watching the games.
Fair.
But the Phillies has always been my respite, because the basketball season ends, baseball season starting, and that is the most relaxing night. I love baseball. For whatever reason, you can go there. People relax. They know you're out there with your family to watch the game. We go to bark in the park with our dogs. The Phillies I love. So the run during the World Series was awesome. But everybody was so crazy that we had tickets for the one night that got rained out, and I couldn't go the next night because I had to go to New York, and my family all went the next night, and they came back and said, it was much more fun going to the game without you. Nobody was bothering us. We got to just watch the game. So that was a little bit of a heartbreaker for me.
Yeah, man. You listen. I think you need to embrace. You're basically number two to the Philly fanatic at this point. You've become the team mascot. You have it just. I'm telling you, I'm not. Maybe you got a body double out there as well. But it literally felt like you had season tickets and were there every third night, my man. Every third
That
night.
was a fun run, man. Philly was on fire. It was so unexpected, and it was awesome.
No, it's wonderful stuff, and obviously came up just 2 games shy, losing to Houston in the World Series. What is if you have, some people collect memorabilia, some don't, but do you have a piece of Phillies memorabilia that is near and dear to you, something that's like really cool that's in the house at all, or are you just not that kind of guy?
No, I'm not a memorabilia guy, autograph guy. Same thing with I'm bad even with my own stuff. I don't keep a lot of my own stuff. I'm not into that, but I do have some great, when I go to the game, I usually always wear a jersey. I got a great old Mike Schmidt jersey.
Yeah.
And I got a great I did a charity bowling event with Jimmy Rollins one time, and he had these special jerseys made for us that are green and gold. I have that. So I like the jerseys.
Dig that, man. Favorite Philadelphia, maybe it is a Philly. Like when you were growing up, who was the guy? I was, my parents born and raised in Chicago. I live in Chicago. So Walter Payton was that person for me. Did you have a particular athlete idol growing up?
Dr. J, when I was in 5th grade, when the Sixers signed Dr. J, I was 5th grade. So that was like God coming to, it took us all in Philadelphia like a week to really believe it was true, because the Sixers were struggling before that. And it was like, it was the greatest player of all time coming to our city. So while he was here, and those Sixers teams were big, were so big to all of us. The Eagles in Philly, though, you gotta, as much as I'm a basketball guy and I love it, but the Eagles are so big in Philadelphia. Yeah. And it's a part, there's bad weather that time of year. So it's what everybody does. Like everybody goes to church, then watches the Eagles games, and then eats as it's a family thing. When they won the Super Bowl, I'm calling my father, we're crying. It's like, it's a family event. So, I can go back to like Roman Gabriel, Norm Snead, all the old Ron Jaworski. We love those Dick Vermeil teams. The Eagles are such a part of your life here.
Man, oh man, Embiid just dropped like 53 the other night. Eagles are the best team in the NFL. Phillies just made the World Series. I'm not dialed in on the hockey, so I don't know how good the Flyers are.
Flyers are struggling a little bit. But
and that's good stuff there. And yeah, as we mentioned off air, Eagles are legit. The way that they just won that game over the Giants, that's the one that if anyone was kind of like, are they not? Like, are they really the best team in the NFC, if not the NFL? That was the one to convince a lot of folks there. So
if I was still coaching, I would be using Jalen Hurts quotes and Jalen Hurts highlights and Jalen Hurts experiences with his teammates as examples to our team all the time. They'd probably be sick of it, but they got it. They know I love the Eagles because we got all kinds of different fans. But I love his leadership. Forget his talent. His leadership's off the charts.
Jay, it's so wonderful to have you in the CBS Sports family. Listen, we're done. And first of all, we went longer than I told you we would. That's part of the Eye on College Basketball podcast experience. I'm sorry, we went longer.
I don't have practice to go to. I'm good. It's different now, Matt. As I told you, you always did a great job. I always respect you. Just when you started to go off a little bit, when you're coaching, you're worried because you got to represent a university, you got to represent a team.
Yes.
Now I'm good to go, buddy.
This was fun, loose. I'm just telling you. Next one with Parrish. Just get ready. We say that lovingly. Again, Jay Wright, college basketball analyst for CBS Sports. You're going to see him in studio this Saturday. Triple header on CBS. Gonzaga, Alabama starts at 1, and then you've got the CBS Sports Classic. I will be reporting from Madison Square Garden for that double header there, and then Jay will be with CBS Sports throughout the season, and then once we get into the tournament, doing work with CBS Sports and Warner Brothers Discovery Sports. Jay, thanks so much for joining us. Look forward to talking to you throughout the season, my man.
Great to be with you, buddy. Great job.
All right, we're going to have another episode, another preview Friday, as usual, GP will be back, and we are going to do a massive weekend preview, hit all the biggest storylines in college hoops. So get ready for that, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.